나는 그냥 lemre seshuma inma jikibu chunye lamjirin ba dan tingye lamjirin ba ne chimbe lamjiri ba dan dinane da ngonjuge de a samo tongba ni shereke phashin nyame ni shila sunje tongba ni kom de shila sunje kom ko re saji kisin da di yanche anzu kisin ma ne di da chasan chi shu sawaje.
Good evening. Last week then, we completed looking at the text in accordance, or the text, the essence of refined gold, with the trainings that are in accordance with the varying capacities of beings. The trainings shared initially looking at the trainings shared with a practitioner of initial capacity, thereafter the trainings shared with a practitioner of intermediate capacity, and then finally coming to the training unique to a practitioner of greatest capacity. And within that, we looked at the 6 perfections this year, and we've concluded over the last 2.5 weeks looking at the union of calm abiding and meditative insight. Having trained well in the topics of the Mahayana Dharma, topics that include love and compassion, the wisdom realizing emptiness, having trained well in these, then one needs to embark in training in secret mantra. Turning to the text, the top of page 48. So my translation's only slightly different. Having trained well in the sutra paths common to the mantra vehicle, free from doubt, you must engage in the mantra vehicle.
기부 충에 남기림바 징게 남기림바 기부 침별 남기림바 전주심 냠내 제단 잠니제 전주심 안에 파신 중에 냠내 디시에디다 뇌 냠내 제단 그 바시고래 제가 뇌람 대라 투모에 남기림바 하시고 투모에 남기림바 하시고 디가르슨 투모에 남기림바라나 가라서나 나 냠내 지기 제바이나야 대 전주심나 니제다 전주심 파신 중에 냠내 동유도 비시라 냠내 제고고래 다 전주심비게 되겠네 다 산유튜브에 쳐도 전주심기 태바침비 쉬냠는 제바나 디냠는 제고 제사디 니가 냠는 제고 봐서 투모에 남기는 봐서 가지고 다디니 파신 태백감네 셰야게 다 잠니제 전주심 되네 파신 주게 냠네 기생하다 데 안에 가소리 안에 가소리 Shengu Dua Jibi, doing over Shinyam Jeta, and the Tumo Lamgirin Barriers, the Tumo Labde, Tumola Nigi, Tumores, Nigage, Cousin Duek of the Yamlen Jeda, Janjusim Yamlechina, the Yamlen Jegore, San Yoko, Tubechodo, the Yamlen Jegores. Tangagan Yamlen Chebainea, the Sunyamlen Jegores, the Yamlen Majeba, Nagan Yamlen Jayoma, Jezade, Nigage Yamlen Jego, the Tumo Lamgirin Basura.
The section starts with, having trained well in the sutra paths common to the mantra vehicle. The sutra paths that are common to the mantra vehicle are what we have been looking at. So they, in particular, whilst they include all the trainings that beings of varying capacities engage in that a practitioner of supreme capacity still does engage in the trainings that are shared or common with a practitioner of initial and intermediate capacity. Also, the practices in the sutra vehicle that are also in common with that of the mantra vehicle are those that are unique to a practitioner of supreme capacity, a practitioner of the Mahayana sutra vehicle. So those are what we've been looking at this year. There's 6 perfections, the training in bodhicitta, what we looked at a little while ago, and the 4 ways to positively influence others, as well as, of course, the union of calm abiding and meditative insight. So all these trainings of the sutra vehicle are shared or common with the mantra vehicle. And the meaning of this term common or shared is that whether a practitioner is engaging in the trainings of the sutra or tantric vehicle, they need to engage in the trainings that are common or shared to both vehicles, such as bodhicitta, developing the wisdom realizing emptiness, the 6 perfections, and the 4 ways to positively influence others. So that's the meaning of the practices that are common or shared with the sutra paths and the mantra paths.
Lam namla labor labne sigur chesa donga tumo lam namla labor labne sidu chesa dadi siwang de dejin nyel shege jamni janchu sem dongye parjin tugi nyamne dongye tu be sherap odeso donga tumo lam se dele labor lab chesi yabo jang gore di twesam gomsum je yabo jang sigur dadi di labne se di sigur.
Again, this first part of the sentence, having trained well in the sutra paths common to the mantra vehicle. So having trained well in these paths that are common means one has trained well through hearing, reflecting, and meditating on bodhicitta, 6 perfections, and the wisdom realizing emptiness. So that is the meaning of having trained well in those paths.
Den misavara sine ngebardo sikorta den misavara sine ngebardo den ngala jupar chagola site den ngagi nyamne jigore site den ngadu ngagi nyamne je de ngagi nyamne de mingar tumo mayemba sanga dori chabe lam nyamne siwa tumo mayemba sanga dori chabe lam nyamne de ngebardo jigore jere.
That first sentence now in its entirety, having trained well in the sutra paths common to the mantra vehicle, free from doubt, you must engage in the mantra vehicle. So having trained well then in the sutra vehicle, in other words, having heard, reflected, and meditated well, then when one has gained certainty or free from doubt in the sutra vehicle, then one must train in the mantra vehicle. The Mahayana is divided into the shared sutra vehicle and that which is shared or common, the sutra paths, and that which is not shared or uncommon, and that is the mantra vehicle. And this then must be trained in when one has gained certainty in one's training in the sutra vehicle.
Tumo mayimba sanga dorji thabala tumo mayimba la go kimchangara lamne tanga nyamlen jebati ko nga ga nyamlen je khorong juge je ma do nga zo de gamne nyamlen je di kele andi sanga ge nyamlen je gugo marwa di je hen de nga ga nyamlen khorong je ma do je gugo mar me wa za tumo mayimba se gorda binanga 저게 태바침비 취념는 제라 뒤에 감니시비 태바침비 취념는 제발라 자주 셈곰 아니 짐바다 추준쇠바 전제 삼대 시라념는 거 디념는 제야들 봐 디마도 아니 상아들이 테미 시비 람디게 냠는 제 고고 말에 대 고고 말에 디제 먹어봐도 다 소수 제고랬네 상아 냠는 제가 코로나 지부고 냠는 제고자 투모 많이 봐 제가 잘알만은 소수 지부고 되라 네 투모 많이 잘알라 그러와 지나가 니가 베제타이는 안 투모알라 그러와 진짜 상아들이 티베 냠는데 나 냠는 제 코로나 지부마도 샹다기 디지 냠는 제 고고 말에 진짜 투모 많이 봐서 그래.
Here then we're seeing a division into what is common and uncommon for trainees or for practitioners. What is common or shared is the sutra vehicle. So, for example, the trainings in the perfections of generosity, ethical restraint, patience, and so forth, these are common or shared between someone who is engaging in either the sutra or the tantric path. But then there are uncommon trainings that a practitioner only of the mantra vehicle or the tantric vehicle engages in. So that is the meaning of the term common and uncommon. There are those practices which are common to the sutra and the tantric vehicle, and those which are uncommon in that they are only engaged in by practitioners of the tantric trainings.
상아 세대 상세대 나세대 네 칭이고를 상아라도 상라나 예 인가 저기 나가 냠는 제디 아니 샹리아 지금이 잡라다나 샹리아 지게 파지우제의 가소래 낭매징은 제제jem 뭐죠 소소 상신 비비고네 샹기 하 먹어서 소소기 아니 하 먹어서 상와치는 냠는 제고면서 내가 상세디시고래.
A term that's sometimes used and is in your translation is that of secret mantra. What is then the meaning then of the first term, secret? So all that it means is that a practitioner of the tantric vehicle, or the mantra vehicle, or the secret mantra vehicle, should not necessarily make a big deal about that they are engaged in tantric practice. Don't make it public. Don't make a display of one's tantric practice. That is the meaning of the word secret.
Sanskrit kidnala mandara sekjuwa mandara sekura. Mandara sede man sede semla gore yi sekure. Tara sen kyopa la gore. Jidai danda begil tsugine yi kyopa la gore. Jisanda nganzu ge samlo yi di pa kyopa des garelo kyopkorsen dada nganzu yi di nyommo ba duksumge shangwando shongde jisa nyommo be shangwando songje 바 뇽모 비나 취되어res 지상 코와를 내되어res 지상 디니자 먼저 이디 셈디 뇽모 바델에 타르제 야 껴고래서 뇽모 발에 타와제네 야 탈비 람라 꼬고 그러니까 될래야 아니 이 껴봐 시리다 간질래 나 라위디 만타라 세디 나세 don달라 가르고세네 먼저 이 먼저 콜위기 뇽모 발에 야 껴봐 타와제 바시고래 don다지시고래 타와제 바 The
second of the two terms in secret mantra is the Sanskrit word mantra, and this literally means mind protection. In other words, mantra is utilized to protect the mind, and from what? What keeps us bound within the suffering realms of samsara, the afflicted minds. So again, the meaning of the Sanskrit word mantra is to protect the mind, and to protect the mind from the afflictions. And how to do so? Through training in this way, one will gain freedom from these afflictions. And through attaining freedom from the afflictions, one is protected from any harm that they could do to oneself, because one has attained freedom from them.
아니네 자 당은 저기 안다 나게 냠내시대 세대 가르치려 다 가르치고고래 가르가 림바로 가르치어래 세다 아주 도당 아니게 캬바를 가르려 세디마 지마 세시지 더디 쉬베나 아 직semle 소소래 오다 나스네 디니실고 도세네 디니실고 심비게 캬바를 하고야다 내가게 냠내 오두수 림바딘데 제고도와 디네딘 도와스나 하고야기 캬바르여래 디인사다 디나한테마 더디스마도 민디니 니 딜레 되스마한테 가시지마 디생 가시지마 쉬샤고전스.
In this first sentence, we've heard that there are trainings which are shared or common to the Sutra and Tantric vehicles, and then there are those which are unique to the Tantric vehicle. So that then alludes to that there clearly is a distinction between the Sutra vehicle and the Tantric vehicle. So here in our text, it's only a few sentences on the Vajrayana, on the Tantric vehicle. So I'll expand a little bit now on what we have in our text, talking about the distinctions between the Sutra and Tantra vehicles.
나는 저기 나는가 냠는 제거야 가르레스. 당한 저기 잔슈쌤 뒤에 qab는 시비게다 잠니제 잔슈쌤 82개 냠는 진짜 상계고만 톱투고도 와서 제가 딩가 냠는 제거야스 가면도 어디 제거 김자 가르레스. 제가 직바 직다 되네게 도와 용구로 와.
It's good to know this, because one may think, what is the need to engage in the mantra vehicle, to engage in Tantra? Surely the Sutra vehicle is sufficient, because one can't attain enlightenment on the basis of the Sutra vehicle. So is there even a need for the mantra vehicle?
닝지의 슉체라게 슉체 모시고 나가서 되게 감내 냠내 체를 닝지 빼 슉체볼래요 갑라 가서서 나가서겠다 되게 감내 냠내 체바나 산지 고마 태워 토야리아 균능 부시고 고고 레제래 다 균능 부시고 고르되 갑라자 젠레 미베 셴 둥아 다 자고서 닝지 빼 슉체볼래다 당아 까와 되니게 롬 까와치 까와 망부 링리아 딱이 자주심 냠렌지 되디 당아 산지 고마 토마도 셈젠지 둥아 세야리아 데링과도 나 까와 같이 봐도 되베네 셈젠디게 까와 디바도 둥아뇨 되고라 제다 진짜 만에 지게 남상 요고 안에 지게 산 셈젠디게 둥아를 껴고도 디상아 요고 산지 고마 토고도 세제 디자당이 가 냠렌 제발에 때네 근데 산지게 산지 고마 토야기 교가 람 교고 톱투에게 탑람 나기 람 땡샤바 땡여를 송여를 제산디 냠는 제제하는 게 산요고번 토반지 인세제 도스지는 가지고 셈슐 마소나 도스지네 땡아가 냠는 제력이 디디고래제
The motivation to engage in the practices of Tantra, to train in the mantra vehicle, comes about independence on the prior training of the Sutra vehicle. In particular, when compassion has arisen in a powerful manner within oneself, and one is determined to become a Buddha for the sake of others, one will want to do so as quickly as possible. And having trained well in the Sutra vehicle, one will know that one can continue to progress spiritually and be of ever benefit to others through one's continued development, independence on the trainings of the Sutra vehicle. But this takes countless lifetimes, eon after eon of training in the Sutra vehicle to eventually become a Buddha. And the problem the practitioner will have with this is that over these countless lifetimes, these many eons of training, they, as the practitioner, will not be able to be of great benefit to limitless sentient beings because their ability, the practitioner's ability, despite being highly developed, being a bodhisattva, remains limited. They are not a Buddha. Wanting to become a Buddha so that they can ease the suffering of beings as quickly as possible, they will want to become a Buddha as quickly as possible. And this compassion, with this determination to become a Buddha for the sake of others, leads to a tremendous strength of mind arising in the bodhisattva. And that strength of mind gives the courage required to engage with commitment in training in the mantra vehicle.
누가 슉체 사바 차고래 제자들이가 냠네 제바나 산이고 바토야리아 타니오슈 요고토토고 레지레 제자당가 냠네 세리아 나가 냠는데야 배 공부슈레 스나세 냠네 제디 공부슈레 상제레 공바레시레 제자 점불린리아 상제 초고 주고 넘버 20 초고 주고 한 동라지다 장이 피고디네 차상리아 나가 냠네 용고 말레 제자 나가 냠네 세리 공부슈레 제자 상제 점불린리아 초고 주고 전발레자 안에 나가 냠네디 공부를 채고래 제자들이 나가 냠네 배 마서 공부시 대 나가 냠네디 소소라랑게 지야고지 제투바 있나 네 상제 고바 토야게 안에 니발 마서 배 뉴부슈고래 뉴바시무슈고래 제래
Therefore, the entry into what gives the determination for the practitioner to engage in the mantra vehicle is this powerful compassion resulting in a strength of mind, a determination to become a Buddha as quickly as possible without any delay for the sake of others, and thereby to be able to readily engage in skillful actions to alleviate beings from suffering. As a companion to this determination is the recognition not only of the speed of the tantric practices, the speed in the attainment of the final goal of enlightenment, but also the tremendous rarity of the opportunity to engage in the trainings of the mantra vehicle. In fact, the opportunity to train in the mantra vehicle is even rarer than meeting Buddhas. Amongst the wheel-turning Buddhas that will come into our world, whilst there aren't many who are wheel-turning Buddhas over the eons, only very few of them will actually teach Tantra. So over this expanse of time of eon after eon, there will only be a handful of periods where the Tantric teachings are present in the world. So here, the practitioner has, due to their compassion, has the strength of mind and determination to become a Buddha as quickly as possible for others, and recognizing that this opportunity to do so through the fastest method of all, the Tantric method, is incredibly rare. This too adds to the strength of mind to embark on training in the Tantric methods. The practitioner will recognize that in this precious life where they have been born from a mother and met the Dharma, had faith in the Dharma and trained well, that through also now engaging in the Tantric methods, enlightenment in this very lifetime is possible.
Andi kewa chimale nyamne ju chen da du chen kewa ni sum shi nga dene ge so sara nubal pape ge sanje thwe wa kashi kewa ni kashi kewa sum da ma tha le kewa jupdin le ne chedele ya nga nyamne yang kewa chimale nga nyamne de kewa jupdin le yo de dene kewa jupdin de la sanje ko ba tu re so da ma to dene ge sama je ba la ma re so cha sa sanje tu re so.
Also, the practitioner will recognize that even if enlightenment isn't attained in this lifetime, through continuing with these imprints gained now in one's immediately next lifetime, enlightenment may well come then. Or, if it doesn't come in the next lifetime, through continuing in this life, next life, and the life thereafter, in receiving an initiation or empowerment and training and guarding one's vows and pledges well, then perhaps in 3 lifetimes or 5 lifetimes, Buddhahood will be attained. In fact, from the lifetime where one engages in the trainings in the Tantric vehicle, if enlightenment isn't attained in that lifetime, through repeating this process, life after life, receiving initiation or empowerment, guarding one's vows and pledges well, then within 17 lifetimes, Buddhahood will be attained. What we heard at the beginning was that there are practices which are shared and common and uncommon between the Sutra and Tantric vehicle. So we've heard what they have in common are including the trainings in the 6 perfections, including bodhicitta and the wisdom realizing emptiness. So these, whether one is engaging in the Tantric paths or the Sutra paths, one needs to engage in. And the first difference between the 2 vehicles we've heard is the great speed with which one's attainment of enlightenment comes, should one engage in the Tantric path. But in addition to that, what other differences are there then between the Sutra and Tantra vehicles?
제가 제보 상기요 고반데라 가르여서는 꾸가서를 다화시서 류 가서 류다와서 류다와 제가 상기 류디 지바 탐제다 제위게 뻥비게 괜 탐제다 제위 류시자 류다와래 제래 상제기 꾸류셔와 꾸디 상제기 꾸류디 껬 탐제단 자위기 다와서 다발은 껬 탐제 매바 차차와 나 두롤 마서 잡아 주단 잡아 다발라기도 잡아 주니 매와 디나시 냠nen지 껬 탐제 방차와인자 상제기 꾸디 류다바레세 다 상제기 신감되게 내다바시고 내다바 대가서는 껬 탐제단 자위기 내자 내다바시오 되네 롱주에 다와서 롱주 당연 저기 상이 롱주에게 롱주에게 차상 균 탐제단 제위기 롱주 강야를 롱주 다와서 되네 코르다 봐서 상이 그런 게 코르되게 안균 탐제단 제위 강야를 저 코르다 봐서 제가 상이게 라 제보 상이들라 류다바 류되게 류다바레스 상이 내데 상신감되게 내다바레스 아 안에 상이 롱주에게 롱주 다바레스 상이 코르되게 코르다바레스 저 다바 시세오라 제가 데니기 뇌 항아에 냠는 집에 값소 데니기 다바 시디 대당 원에 대한 줄 주요마디나 대단 넘버 2비 대단 지기지경은 지 삼다지 곰제 다되는 거 저게 나게 냠는 집이 값라 데니기 다바 시디 냠는 집 대단 넘버 2비기 람 지금 소속에 냠는 곰제 냠는 지기 제가 제기 람 냠는 제야 되라 나게 냠는 시오래 대단 넘버 2비람 변화가지고 뜀비 산유구 무면에 밀리아바 지부지경아지 샤르시 고미야셔와 제 산유구 무에 많은나요 아주 문이랑 집이게 삼파 나와샤지 공고와 제 넘버 2바시고라 디나신 산지 류다바당 다등한 저 류다바 다요 말에 안쪽에 내디게 녀모바 다견 함지단 자요 말에 아주 롱주에당 아주 코르되기 견 함지단 자요 말에 이내양 아주 데니게 다 아주 류당 롱주에당 안에 코르되기 차상 다바 인섬제 머버제제 대단 넘버 2비기 람디 곰비 냠는 제에게 람데라 당아게 냠는 제 하시고래 디 냠는 제 다데
The final result of training in the Mahayana is the attainment of Buddhahood. Buddhahood is marked by 4 purities: the purity of body, abode, resources, and companions. In other words, the body of a Buddha is pure of all faults. The abode of a Buddha is pure of all faults, as are the resources and companions of a Buddha, pure. Whilst training in the mantra vehicle, one trains in a manner that whilst one doesn't have these 4 purities, of course, one is striving to attain enlightenment, one has not yet attained it, one trains in a way with the aspiration as if one has the 4 purities already. So one has not yet achieved them, one is striving to achieve the 4 purities, but whilst training in the mantra vehicle, one is training as in conformity or in harmony with having achieved these 4 purities of body, abode, resources, and companions.
난 뒤에 냠는 집에 갑라 아주 태바 침비치 뒤에 갑시에게 냠는 제바 갑라 아니 데니기 다바시기 넘버 2비 람디 곰고 말이야. 가서네 잠니제곰 장주샘곰 드니 진배냠네 추진년에 쇠배년 쫀진년에 삼대냠네 네 셰르냠네 된동이 또 비실라 송조곰 두스 냠네 제마도 네 류다 안롱죄다 네다 코르지게 대단 넘버 2바지 곰제 냠네 지교 말에 매반자 다 도당 아니래 뒤에 가서 뒤 냠네 지교 말에 나 가서 되는 냠네 지교래.
Practitioner engaged in the Mahayana Sutra trainings, they don't train in the 4 purities. As we've heard over the preceding months, having generated bodhicitta, the practitioner will train in the 6 perfections of generosity, ethics, patience, joyous perseverance, concentration, and wisdom. And thereafter, as we've heard in recent weeks, they'll train in the union of calm abiding and meditative insight. That's the sutra path. There's no mention of training in the 4 purities. That is something unique or uncommon that a practitioner of the mantra vehicle engages in or trains in.
제부 다바시 용다시 세월 류 다바 네 다바 롱주 다바 콜 다바 대단 넘버 튠비기 람 공규 나이 값수디 다된나 가지고 되니게 류 다바디 메나양 아주 대단 넘버 튠비 람디 공규 여바 요래 나들 냠는 제 요래스 되게 값수 되는 냠는 제 요 말 제가 도당 아니라 개발 가려라나 나이 값수 류소 다바시다 넘버 튠비 람 다된나 가지고야 대단 넘버 튠비 람지 고며 요래스 꼼체 냠는 제 요래스 도에 값수 되는 냠는 제 요 말 제가 도당 아니 개발 들이에서 오다.
So this then is a difference, a key difference between the trainings in the Mahayana Sutra paths and the trainings of the Mahayana Tantric paths. In that, in the Sutra paths, there's no reference to training in the four purities, whereas in the Mantra path, whilst one is cultivating paths within one's continuum, in other words, before the attainment of the final goal of Buddhahood, one is already training in these four purities. In other words, before the four purities are attained, the practitioner of the Tantric vehicle trains as if they already had achieved these purities of body, abode, resources, and companion.
나 냠는 제발에야 림바시 용어를 빼네 규대 시세로 규대시 규시세데 자규 주규 나주규 나주라메 규시데 규대시리에 디나데 자규디 다 마와데 딜레트 토와데 주규데제 딜레 토와데 나주규시 다데 토쇼디 나주라메 규시데 간주게다 두시네 순고래.
The Sutra vehicle is divided into four philosophical tenets, and these are presented in a particular sequence of subtlety from coarser to subtler, starting with Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, Chittamatra, and Madhyamaka. The trainings of Tantra are also divided into four, but these are the four classes of Tantra. So these four then in English are the Action Tantra, Performance Tantra, Yoga Tantra, and Highest Yoga Tantra. And this too is a sequence from the coarser to the subtlest. To then give the names for those more familiar with the Sanskrit, starting with action or kriya, to charya, to yoga, to anuttara yoga tantra. So these are the four classes of Tantra.
대규리 시대 자규 주규 나주규 나주라메규 세지 시체 다딘자 다 코로주기 냠len 제비 갑레네 다드스 가가 용거래 그래서네 자규다 주규 나주규 숨데라 아니 냠len 제디 갑라 델야 가서다 가르치지 람 냠len 제야기 델라 당아주기 다드에 갑서 셰바네 다 초람 조람 통람 곰람 세 냠len 제라 시거와 다딩아 가서 데니기 탄이 제거 말해 다른 저기 유디 오마 숨시데 자기 주기 나주규세 권주의 냠네 지디 갑라 델야 천지게 나주던 천미게 나주어서지 나주 명이 있다고 당연히 천지게 나주던 천미게 나주어서 니니 냠네 지네 지고래 람 냠네 지 림발로 니요래 천지게 나주던 천미게 나주어서.
Further difference. The Sutra vehicle we know is divided into paths, 5 paths, and the 4 training paths are those of accumulation, preparation, seeing, and meditation. So similarly, within the 4 classes of Tantra, there are also differences in terms of how one trains. So of the 4 classes of Tantra, they are usually grouped into 2, with the 3 lower Tantras, and then the 4th highest Yoga Tantra. So the 3 Yoga Tantras of action, performance, and yoga, then those who are engaging in any of these Tantras will train in first the yoga with signs, and thereafter the yoga without signs.
기림나 조림 냠네 세마도 천재 참여 순고 말 다들 야밍 탄일 마소는 기름기 냠내다 조름기 냠내서 니시고래.
So for those training in the lower tantras, they will engage in first the yoga with signs, then the yoga without signs. For those engaging in the fourth type, the fourth class of tantra, that of highest yoga tantra, there are also two stages of training, but these are called the generation stage and the completion stage. The first one trains in the generation and thereafter the completion.
나 기름난 조림 세대는 저 기름기 냠는 제사대 가능시 람나당한 쪽에 땅아에 가서 땅 냠는 기름 냠는 지구에 세대 기름 냠는 제사대 가능시에서나 땅아 쪽에 당보 동반이 삼다 내 동반이 삼다네 근데 동반이 또 별로 뢰딩안에 안에 사시기야다 안에 직del이야 안에 지게 시에강 삼당 두스 공부하다 되는 약강 시에강 되는 강버디게 삼 시에강 좀내는 시에강 나라야 라이게 내 소소라랑 위에 시에강에 리做的 소소라랑 딜하디 인생비게 하디 뭐게죠 곰제 내내가 곰 안에 두스네 곰야디다 기림 곰나데 순거래.
Of the two classes of highest yoga tantra, generation stage and completion stage. Looking at the first generation stage, it's sometimes called, I forget now, production stage or, I don't remember. Anyway, it's mostly called generation stage. Here, one starts with meditating on emptiness, and from one's wisdom that realizes emptiness, from within this wisdom, one generates the environment, including the celestial mansion, the deities within the celestial mansion, as well as cognizing oneself as a deity.
내는 소소라랑 두스전에 김고곰 김고나라야 소소라 할게곰 대신한 저게 다디 대시 상기기 류다바다 네다바 고미야요라서 제사다디 김고계제 김고게 시에강기 동변안에 당한 저기 도다 사다 되는 주바 많이 봐 동변안에 안에 시에강기네 고미도 시에강데 나 저기 상기기 시에강다 넘버 직바 넘버 튠바 곰난디래 상기 시에강다 류 다바시데 안주 동변안에 아주 류셔류 샤다 루고에 되게 되는 류 많이 봐 동변안에 해기 꾸디 고미도 류 다바고 넘버 튠바 곰다 상기기 꾸나신진 상기 꾸나지 공부를 와서 류다고 공부하세지 디셔거래.
In the generation stage, one is already training in the four purities. Remember, one was called the purity of the abode. So the abode is here refers to the environment as well as the celestial mansion and the deities within, or the environment and the celestial mansion, which having meditated on emptiness, the wisdom that realizes emptiness, that wisdom, or from that wisdom arises the celestial mansion, and this then is the pure abode. So one is training in accordance with the pure abode of a Buddha, whilst one is still a trainee, one is not yet an actual Buddha. And similarly, the purity of the body. One realizes the emptiness, from the wisdom realizing emptiness, one visualizes oneself and relates to, cognizes oneself as a deity, as a Buddha. So one in meditation is not, or as a tantric practitioner, one is not relating to one's body in the coarse way as this body of flesh and sinews and so forth, but rather as a body of a deity. But one can only do so through the successful meditation on emptiness, because it's from the state of emptiness arises the abode, the pure abode, as well as the pure body.
디니기다 김고 소소게 소소하다 디좀 뭐봐 지고마도 소소디 인 삼바 뭐봐지는 공고마도 원에 주고 말에 디김고디 영원에 주요 말 소소라 원에 주요 말이네 소소 뭐봐지는 아디 김고디네 주고요 선배게다 하나가 하데다 디인 선배게 뭐봐지 공고로 와 뭐봐이지 공고래.
So the trainee are the trainee embarking on or engaging in the practices of mantra, they are meditating are training in the four purities. They haven't achieved the four purities, they are not a Buddha. So therefore this is done on the level of perhaps one can say faith, but rather in the sense of the level of imagination. So it's not that the four purities have been achieved, but through one's imagination, and conviction, through the wisdom realizing emptiness, one trains in this way.
Dine ane jike sosuge laiki dine sosuge dunliya ane sosuge aji lama da idam dige pa denji jendra denji shu da delaya yoyo sambi mewa che an delaya chego puyada bine lama da idam sosora idam dige pa da sosuge dunli pa peson yoyo sambi mewa che an delaya ane chego puya da de medo da dube da marmeta dine ke cheba ji yuanjia la so ba dama puyo ro den chebe na so puyo di da puyo mo ba che du sin mo ba che ne chebe puyo da ji ji go ro je san di chebe puyo de long jue yong so da ba se go mya che go re.
From the state of emptiness, one has generated the pure abode as well as the pure body. So that's two of the four purities. And before one visualizes one's Lama and one's Yidam and makes offerings to them. So this is all being done in meditation. So it's still on the level of imagination. And in this way, one is making pure offerings, and this then is training in the purity of resources. So this then is the third of the four purities.
Dene ane jige jingwa nalaya ane jige semjen dige ane su deni su chi jingwa nalaba yongju ane delaya chue xie dene konzo ya ane sanji go pang ya sanji ya kore le zhe ya sanji sal ya go song se be me ba chi dus kum gore de so kore yong so ta pa kom na di de da kore yong so ta pa se de.
The fourth purity is trained in also in the meditation session. So the fourth purity was that of companions, or probably more commonly translated as retinue. And here in the meditation session, again, so this is all on the level of aspiration or imagination. Then within the mandala that has been visualized, that has arisen from emptiness, one imagines oneself teaching the Dharma to sentient beings. And this then is the fourth purity, that of the purity of companions.
Na jeremi gabna nyamlen chedi komna denis kumgore chesa da tongba ni sam da tongba ni gane da xie kang zhu xie kang ji da xie kang na la ya so ran ge lai wo ji an ji du lai ko mya da an de ne ge an dus kom an de ne ya so su den la ma de idam de ge la de ne shu de so lian de chue bo pu ya da an de xie sem jian de ge jing bo na la chu de ne chi che an de so le chue xie du jian ne ge rim ka so kom ya de dus kom go re da.
This then in brief is the training in the generation stage of highest yoga tantra. First one meditates on emptiness, and from one's wisdom that realizes emptiness arises the pure abode, including the celestial mansion, and within that arises the pure body, that of the deity. And then imagining oneself or seeing oneself as the deity, one makes offerings to one's Lama and one's Yidam before oneself, and in this way one engages in the training of the purity of resources. And then fourthly, one imagines oneself teaching sentient beings within one's visualized mandala, and this is training in the purity of retinue, or the purity of companions.
Desa delia kunlo janshu sem yueva che, jesa de kunlo janshu sem, den tongba yi sem tongbe nga de tongba yi sam da kum go, jesa tongba yi da janshu sem nyamle yueva che. Dene jesa ningje yueva za an ya an je deli dunli ya an so so gi lama da idam dene ju delia choba ge chim puya da dene se de an jimbe nyamle ka so de choba puya jimbe nyamle che go. Da semjin ma semjin de chu dene chi delia chue she ko de tiba ta son se be meba chi du chin ko sang ye sal ya ko be meba chi du sim je le jimba ta ya ta an su tim son ya la so pa du chin she ne nga je ke sin da de lam rim na she du yo ngo bo shi ane Nyambarmawa, Tuanjuba, Tuantumba said, Dusinyamniki Dinan Leon Kore, Dusine, Chita Sunam Papameba, Yachimba Sayagi, Dusine, Kirim Yamnichi, Duschigore, Chizangagi, Yamlin Kidin Yamnichi, Dinchigurmada, Lamsangagi Yamnichi, Yumdenje, and the Chig, the Tuyadi, Lamsanti, some Tayomadi, and calling Jimmy Yamji, Dinako Gomar, Chizan Kidin Yamnichi, Dinik Yomare, Yumden said Yomare.
One step I haven't mentioned, but preceding the wisdom realizing, cultivation of the wisdom realizing emptiness, one also meditates on bodhicitta. So bodhicitta and the wisdom realizing emptiness, these two are ever present in one's meditation. So one first generates bodhicitta, meditates on emptiness, and from the wisdom realizing emptiness, as was mentioned, first one visualizes the pure abode, celestial mansion, visualizes oneself as the deity, and then one makes offerings to one's Lama and Yidam and teaching the Dharma to sentient beings. So clearly here we can see some correspondence with the sutra trainings, in that one is meditating on bodhicitta, one is meditating on emptiness, one is practicing generosity through making offerings to one's Lama and one's Yidam, as well as generosity of giving Dharma to sentient beings, and one is doing so with a subdued mind. In other words, being ethically restrained, and one's being patient with all endeavors, etc. So therefore one is practicing the 6 perfections held with bodhicitta. Not only that, but if we recall what we looked at briefly after the 6 perfections, which was the 4 ways of positively influencing others. The first was giving whatever is necessary. So here, in the generation stage, one is making offerings to one's Lama and Yidam, as well as offerings of the Dharma. So that's the first as well as the second, pleasantly teaching the Dharma, encouraging others in the practice of the Dharma, the third of the 4 ways of positively influencing others, as well as the fourth of living in accordance with the teachings oneself. So we see here the 6 perfections and the 4 ways of positively influencing others. These are all being engaged in whilst one is training in the generation stage. So I want to make this point clearly here, because all too often there's a misconception that when one thinks of tantric practice, immediately there is a relationship that comes to mind of engaging in practice with a consort. This doesn't come up here. We see in the generation stage its close relationship to what one has already been training in the sutra vehicle.
Chikale, Yuene, Kalele, Masemba, Chikale, Sueba, Suene, Yamnichi, Sube, Yamle Ligore. The Denigi, Yachuba Pueda, Shan Simjan Dunja, Denicum, Kashin, Tushung, Yamnichi, Zundu, Yamle Ligore. Dene, Nanzuke, and the Chik Denigi, Yamnichi, because Sim Namian, Shando Marshon, the Zechitu, some Zechitu Duchene, and Chik. Barimba in Kiwa to Yata, then the Kisan Simbacha, to Sim Shan, Namia Mason, then it's to do Chikungo Baza, and there's some day in the Ligore. The Persian Jew in Yamnachasa in the Ligore.
Just to mention the remaining perfections explicitly of mentioned generosity and ethical restraint, and of course engaging in meditation such as this, one will encounter some obstacles. And one here practices the perfection of patience. So, a mind conjoined with emptiness and bodhicitta, one transforms all difficulties and thereby is patient with the hardships one experiences. Moreover, whilst engaging in virtue, one's mind is joyous, and one continues with delight to engage in virtue, and this then is the 4th perfection of joyous perseverance. And one engages in this meditation in an undistracted manner, with single-pointed concentration, and thereby is also engaging in the 5th perfection of concentration. So in this way, the First 5 perfections are practiced, and this is all done in the context of the wisdom realizing emptiness and bodhicitta. Hence, all 6 perfections are practiced within the generation stage.
어디 게임기 냠내 제단 당은 저게 라파로 돌디로치 되네시 되마 제제 나 되네 디젤라 디 냠내 약고 차에 제란 가령 무슨 다 조름이 있어 냠내 제데 니 고수고 거래
Whilst there is more to that can be said on the generation stage, we can leave it at that, so that in brief is what one trains in the generation stage of the 4th of the 4 classes of Tantra, that of highest yoga Tantra. Then of the 2 levels of training, that was the generation stage. Then the second is the completion stage, or sometimes called the perfection stage.
난 조름 냠내 제세 데레 림발 마스나 림발 죽순 거래 조름 냠내 제야라 그 대선 마스나 죽거래 림발 마스나 당보 니바 숨바 시바 나바 두바 카르데 두스림 바실레게 다 당보 카르스네 류엔세로 류엔세 데네 나베 세멘 데네 귤리 외사 송죽 세디 어디 죽거 다디 냠내 제야데 조름 니까베 냠내 제야데 류엔 나웬 세멘 귤리 외살 송죽시오래
The completion stage, this has 6 levels of training, starting with first being physical isolation, verbal isolation, mental isolation, fourthly, the illusory body, fifthly, clear light, and the 6th is that of union. So again, the 6 levels of training within the completion stage are physical isolation, verbal isolation, mental isolation, followed by the 4th of illusory body, clear light, and union.
나디 조림니까 비 냠는 제디 다조 냠는 가르치고 그랬어 내가 저기 다 류리아 소수고 류라 소수고 류리아 자다 룽당 된티게 두세 답제 될이야 소수 류기 류나라 자제 자나라야 룽조상 토네 두시는 냠네 공고를 당하죠.
To put it in a very brief way, when one trains in the completion stage, one is training with one's body through using the subtle energies and the channels.
이제 내가 당한 저기 류리아 안에 잠만 보여 지상 자디 용어요 송 다디나 자나에 내가 저 류리아 자숨 잠만 보여로 봐다 류리아 잠만 보여래네 다디 저 자호를 가제 가래선 자 위에서 네네 되게 자호를 되게 가고 가려 열어서는 저기 자호를 시송 거래 내가 저 지워 디친이 콜로선 될 자호를 찍지고래 짐발롱주 유콜로선 될 자호를 찍제 인가 취 유콜로서데 자호를 찍제 대화 주비 콜로선 대화를 자호 찍제 매니 상내리아 상이 대균 콜로서 자호 찍제 되니게 자호 되게 바 모여서 될이야 장도르지 안 되네 두스네 아니 두스당보 자디게 두스 삼당 거래.
The channels are connected to chakras, and the most commonly presented chakras will be the 5, those at firstly at the crown, secondly at the throat, thirdly at the heart, fourthly at the navel, and fifthly at the secret place. So those, through training in the channels and the winds or the energies that flow through them, connected to the chakras, this is what one is engaging in the completion stage. One is utilizing these in one's training in the completion stage.
나 인자 당한 저기 류래 잠만 보여변한데 자조를 자 숨여래시래. 자 로마다 양마세지 자 우마세데 자 숨용고레스 자 숨여레스 자자다 기마데 자 숨 기마데라 자 직제 예윤이랴 자니제 두신 자 숨용고레스.
And amongst the many channels, there are 3 primary ones: the central channel and the ones on either side, the left and right channel.
자자다 자딜임 자자디 ngāngzhū tsadhī kīmā kī tsadhī ngāngzhū tātā ngāngzhū lūng dhōyā dī kāwā chūgō sī nē 디 예인이게 자들 마도 우마기들 양안 쪽이 룽조 투고 말아 저기 자주 룽조 투고 말에 다 제상 땅 쪽에다 곰 조림이 거서 곰에게 쪼어디 가르고 버스네 제상 두시네 디 기마게 자 우마세야 될 디나 바 룽파 줘야게 다 되네 섬때 공부를 줘 디나래 자주 룽조고 말에.
For ourselves, generally energy or wind doesn't travel in our central channel, but in the completion stage, one is focusing on being able to dissolve winds into the central channel.
디 가르친 누구고 말을났네 나는 저기 자 로마다 장마세 이은이게 자디기 파고 두신의 뒤제 담제요르세 델레직제 대직제 대지 두신의 고 카드 무슨 대두스요르와 디 두스직고 디직고도 파고니 고르샤데 두스담샤르 기마들 담샤데고 이 이거 조서요 말제장 룽조투고 말에 두고 말이지.
The reason why for ourselves energies don't naturally travel within the central channel is because the two channels on either side, the left and the right, they are bound around, at certain points, they are bound around the central channel, creating knots. And this prevents winds from entering and flowing through the central channel.
나가 저기 데니게다 곰비 갑라야 안 룽디 마자 우마디 날마 나야게 된다 두스네 다 곰비야게 제사 두스네 곰비야디 다 나저 조름지 가서 그 류엔세다 류엔 코멘당 보나 다저 우마기들이야 룽다야게 된다로 공고래 류엔 당보 좀더 어디 마 덴마 나야게 된다.
When one is engaging, so referring back then to the 6 levels of the completion stage, the first was that of physical isolation. In physical isolation, this is where one trains in dissolving winds or energies into the central channel.
that Luwingi, that Tambong and the Luwin community, Luwin Topakigo Marwa, no com Jesine, Luwingi Topakigo, Lisa, and Jesa did Lungba, then Ma Uma del Mat, Zata Lung Taya do to com Jetin, Lung Nalma, the woman Ma Lung Jikma, Joy, just Joy, Cap, then to dinner and they call Luwingi Topakigo, Kigo.
As one is training in the completion stage, one hasn't completed it. Whilst training in the physical isolation, the energies are not traveling within the central channel. One is trying to do so, and eventually one does succeed in getting energy to enter into the central channel, but it still will not flow throughout, but will enter in above the heart chakra, either at or above the heart chakra.
Semen said that it Dongbani, the Nanzuki Dugarcia, Dongbani Doblo, Dongbani Dobigi, Dongbani is Nanzuki, Sem Chamodiki, Dongbani Topi, Doni Dunjitsu Topiki, Monsum Topama, Doni Dunjitsu Topiki, Dongbani Topi Lutella, Semen Sewers, Semen, that Delia and the Semen, that Tartuk Sajing, Semen Aneta, Dambo Comio de Chiki, and the Yara Topa Tartuba Chadwa, the Semen and that Yasho de. The cement be cement tarduk chago cement said. Cement tarduk and the cement and the topa tarduk. Cement de la dambo communist Lamsa cement Yakochag Marwa, they come even the Katagazile, that cement tarduk said, Chagi Yasho charge or the cement tarduk. Cement be with their tarduk or cement.
That was just a very brief presentation of the first of the 6, the physical isolation, and skipping to the third, that of mental isolation. So mental isolation is where emptiness is realized inferentially. So where one attains an inferential realization of emptiness, so emptiness is realized, but still the meaning generality of emptiness appears to the realizing consciousness. So this is the completion of mental isolation, is where one attains an inferential realization of emptiness. And this realizing consciousness is given the name of the meaning clear light.
다디니게 셈 참어디게 동반이 된지수기 또네 델레 냠바샤 단 냠샤 델레수 당요도 다디니게 동반이 또베 셈 타르 비외세세 동반이 또 된지수기도 로디기 아니 현지치 현재 디 셴바 룽데당 오지 룽쥐 룽디게 녀렌제제 데는 류시 두고르다 귤루세디 디 룽원에 두고르다 간주게 수보 메샤르 두지 폼보 마엠비기 규미 류원에 아직 두고르 제래 엉원에 두고르다디 나 류원에 중고르 두고르다 세멘 탈도 비에서 탈독세디 셈데 디 코로나당 오지 룽 코로나 셴버기 룽세로 오지 룽디게 녀렌제제 아니 거 냠샤텔에 당용도 아니 규밀루시 두고레제 이제 와 비에 세멘 탈도 된기에서마다 비에서세 다데데 동방이 된지수기 또 비에서세 저 다딩아저 제잔디 코롱게 렌지치겐제 코롱게 모지부 룽디기 녀렌제제 단냠샤츠르 수당도 류응외시 규밀류응외시 두고레제
데네디 기르데 토트 데네데디 페기거서레
배에서 규르와 디 규제바 되는 규리 두고레스 데디 규리디 마다베 규리시고로 데 녀모바 마방베 규리 녀모바 다마다세데 녀모바 마방비 규리시고래 녀모바 방요 말 규리 토벼 되네 녀모바 방요 말 될래야 안에 마다비 규리라고래.
So I think I made an error there before when I said that was the meaning clear light, but it's actually the example clear light. Anyway, when one attains then the third of the six, so this is the mental isolation. One has attained an inferential realization of emptiness, and this is the example clear light. That mind, that wisdom is called the example clear light. When the practitioner then abides in meditative equipoise on emptiness, so they've attained this inferential realization of emptiness, still a meaning generality present. They engage repeatedly in this meditation, which will be in meditative equipoise on emptiness, and this consciousness, this realization of emptiness, the example clear light, is the cooperative cause that gives rise to the illusory body. And when one gives rise to the illusory body, it is the actual illusory body that one gives rise to.
한 검제 한 동방이 또베 동이 원순 또베 로케고로다 대시 동이 된지 수도 어려와 되네지는 규리주 다 되네지는 한 검제 한겨 검제 다 되네게 동방이 원순 또베 로케어도 세메다 셈디 동어도 벌로디 셈 참어들다 당한 저기 되게qabla 셰바데 셈디게 라바라바레 다디셰베 셈 참어 셈 차셔디게 시고라 동이 또야 시고래 제가 셈 차셔디게 동이 또야디 원순도 또야디 된지 외세라 거래 대지 된지 수기 또 한달에 비외세스 민다고 그래. 비외세스. 외세는 돈이도 불러라고. 외세는 돈이도 불러라고 그래. 다 비외세는 돈이도 셈 차셔지게 된지 돈이 된지 수기도 불러들라 비외세스지. 아주 세면세티가 리고 그래. 다 되네 귤류 줍산에 되네 양 양자 동반이라 냠바셔 고묘도 되네 동반이라 고묘도 동반이 원순도 불러고 오기용으로 될라 된지 셈 차셔지게 동반이 원순도 불러기용도 Della VSS, 20 VSS, la corming, 20 VSS.
The six levels of training in the completion stage. First was the body isolation, which I mentioned, physical isolation, which I mentioned a bit. Then there was verbal isolation, and then mental isolation. A mental isolation is completed when one attains an inferential realization of emptiness, and that inferential realization of emptiness, that consciousness, is called the example clear light. And through repeatedly training in this, in meditative equipoise on emptiness, this example clear light is the cooperative cause for the attainment of the illusory body. When the illusory body is attained, one achieves the fourth of the six levels. Fourth of the six levels, if I'm getting my counting right. A fifth of the six levels. Is a fifth of the six levels. Clear light was the fourth. So what is now marking the distinction or the progression here between the third of mental isolation to the fourth of clear light and then into the illusory body is when emptiness has now previously been realized inferentially, in other words, with a meaning generality. When emptiness is then realized directly, no meaning generality, so a direct realization of emptiness is achieved, then that is when one gives rise to the illusory body. And what was the cause for the illusory body? It was the example clear light. And so clear light, or sometimes it's called luminosity, is the wisdom that realizes emptiness. And when it's an inferential realization of emptiness, that particular clear light is called the example clear light. Then, so that the example clear light, or the inferential realization of emptiness, is the cause that leads to the direct realization of emptiness and the attainment of the illusory body. And with that, and following the attainment of the illusory body, comes the attainment of the meaning clear light. And the meaning, clear light again is a wisdom that's realizing emptiness. But now it's a direct realization of emptiness, and this is the direct realization of emptiness is called the meaning clear light, whereas the inferential realization of emptiness was called the example clear light. And again, the term clear light refers to consciousness, a wisdom realizing emptiness. And the purpose of giving the wisdom realizing emptiness this different name is because whilst it's emptiness that has been realized, it has been realized by a far subtler mind than the wisdom that realizes emptiness through training solely on the Sutra vehicle. So emptiness that is realized either inferentially or directly on the Sutra vehicle, that realizing consciousness, that wisdom, is far coarser than the consciousness, that wisdom that realizes emptiness through training in the Tantric path. Through training in the Tantric path, the consciousness that realizes emptiness is far, far subtler. Hence, it's called, if it's a direct realization, the meaning clear light.
Denigi Tomba Yungosum Dobadi, Denigi Dungu said, Nyambarshade Rwada. That the two Nyamchale, two Danyodu, the Deji Nashin, the Tomba Yungos Dobo Korongi, that Yalenchi, Korongi. The Shambarju Lungsi, the Koran Watch, Lunti, Yelen Cheche, that Tomba Yungosum to be Sem Chasho, then you said the Nyamsha Tele to down on you, and Gumukush to Gore, Gumukush Yaja, Gumuku, the she, Gumukush to Gore, Gumuku to Ne, Gumuku Yavacha, the senior Yava, water, Gumuku Yavacha. Then Yamsi down on you, Yomo Bapan or Yomo Bapanche, the Dutch of Bachason, Dutch of Bachar, then Yomo Bapampi, Pamba Toare. Dela, Yomo Baby Pamba top, and then Gumuku, Niga Yediventa, Dela Sonjukla Gorda, Pamba Sonjuk said, Sonjuk Pamba, Sonjuk Sora, Carson Yomo Bapampi, Pamba Tan, Gumuku, Niga Toby, Niga Yevanta, Delegate, Deniga Yedivadela, Sonjuk Sora. Gumuku Tan, Yomo Bapampi, Pamba, Gordian said Yorova, Yomo Pampi, Pamba, Niga Topsare. They told you that.
Having realized emptiness directly, the meaning clear light, then the yogin will continue in meditative equipoise, realizing emptiness, and this consciousness then, that is realizing emptiness, becomes a cooperative cause to give this consciousness that's realizing emptiness is an exceptionally subtle mind, and it is the cooperative cause to further give rise to the illusory body. So the illusory body was already achieved, it's further arise, and here one becomes a foe destroyer, an arhat. And at this point, when one becomes a foe destroyer, one attains the sixth of the 6 stages of the completion stage, that of union. And the term union is used in a variety of contexts. Here, it's a union of the illusory body and true cessation, the true cessation of having abandoned the afflictions together with its seeds. That is the union that one attains. That was really a very brief presentation of the 6 trainings of the completion stage. So those again were the physical isolation, verbal isolation, mental isolation, illusory body, clear light, and that of union.
Gyudine Sheba Dragi, Wangi, Gumin Barche, De Se, Kailabe Damse the Dumba, Sushindu, Sonti, Gyudi, or Oma Sumne, Shen Dana, and Sanje, the Temege, natural Lopshing, Gombartana, and the Rimige, natural Rimjendu, Labe, Dongage, Lamgi, Tamje, Dube, Lamgi, Lyonso Zobala, Laber Gube, the Jutoba, Dunda Dempa, Cheba Yinshin. Di Sui Deta Bukone, and Yewe Temba Rimbor, Rangyugi, Rangshin Yula, Sun Ang Sachi.
Now returning to the text, and much of this we've already covered. Okay. Properly guard. Oh, wait, ready up here. In order to ripen your mind stream so as to engage in the mantra vehicle, initially an initiation in accordance with what is set forth in the tantras should be bestowed by an authentic Vajramaster. Properly guard those vows and pledges that are accepted at the time of the initiation. If you gain initiation into any of the 3 lower classes of tantra, train in their systems of yoga with signs and then yoga without signs. If you are initiated into the upper tantra, first train in the generation stage, practices, and then those of the completion stage.
Gyudine Sheba Dargi, Wangi Gumimba Jes, and Gunalma, Wang and Lucida, Dusus Nango Rimba did Nangores, Gunan, Sumba Nashin, Jen, Lameja, Wangatinis Nangores. Then Lomi on to Wang Shubi Kablea, on to Kunlong, Samla, Chidin Jore, Wana Be Kablea, and Samla, Lamigema, Wanda Ted, Samla Dine Tangore, Sadia, Lomi Kone, Wang Shubi Kable, Samla Dine Tanchine, Wang Shugores, then Wang Shuba another, Wangi Gumimba Chepare.
The first sentence that I've just read out, in order to ripen your mind stream so as to engage in the mantra vehicle, initially an initiation in accordance with what is set forth in the tantras should be bestowed by an authentic Vajramaster. So the entry point into the tantric trainings, having already trained well in the sutra vehicle, is to receive an initiation or an empowerment from an authentic or a genuine Lama, qualified Lama, or qualified Vajramaster. And he also needs to bestow it in accordance with what is set forth in the tantras. So it needs to be bestowed fully, correctly, completely. Similarly, not only must the Vajramaster follow the instructions as presented in the tantras, so too should the student. And the student would do so through paying attention in the initiation or the empowerment, and whatever the Vajra master instructs them in terms of their reflection, such as the cultivation or the required motivation, the initiate, the student, needs to follow the advice of the Lama, and in this way the student too is acting in accordance with what is set forth in the Tantras. So both the Vajra master and the recipient of the initiation, they both need to train or act in accordance with what is set forth in the Tantras.
Dene deetse keilangbe damsida domba sujinu sung sededa wang naibe kabda wang shubi kala wangi domba shugoro kas nga domba shugorwa nga domba shuyada den domba de yabo sunggo kore seda dene nga damsik sede lamegi ma dosu jegor diche chugumar da di de jegor seda dus kana shigi di ba ande yabo de an lame kana wa de nyamle yabo jegor dam sunggo kore seda on do sunggo kore.
Properly guard those vows and pledges that are accepted at the time of the initiation. So in the initiation, the Vajra master will bestow certain vows and pledges on the students, and the students will be accepting them, will willingly be accepting them. These then are to be guarded from then forth. What are the vows and pledges? Well, in brief, the Lama will advise in accordance with the Tantras, various trainings to engage in or not to engage in, what should be adopted and what should be abandoned. And the student who is willingly engaging in this, the initiation, thereafter needs to, or from henceforth, needs to guard those vows and pledges.
Denigeda wang shu said wang dombat tamse sungje dang nyamlen che de la ngi gydio oma sumne sheba na chanje ge chami na joli ba nyamlen che gore esaji gydio oma sumne sheba da nyamlen che de la da chanje ge chami ge na jose nyamlen che gore es.
In the next sentence, if you gain initiation into any of the three lower classes of Tantra, train in their systems of yoga with signs and then yoga without signs.
다디네 고마 나줄라미 귤이나 고마타나 리미게 나줄라 림신도 라바 랍고베 라베스도 리미라서 길 당보 길임 랍 장곰 장 되네 안에 조름게 두신 랍고레스 림바신도 쓰도 당보 길임 자 되네 조름을 양념을 제고레스.
The three lower tantras were those of action, performance, and yoga. Then the fourth tantra is the tantra within the upper class. And that's the next sentence. If you are initiated into the upper tantra, first train in the generation stage practices, and then those of the completion stage.
Dene enzadan manjuge deji janju sem due kapshebe jam nije janju sem dongyu dube sherala nyamlenche dene wangshu dene wangi thone ani gerimna zorimna dus nyamlenche ba ina ane dongagi lam se dongagi lam ne tamje dube lamji yu lu yonso zoba 라버 규에 세대다 제상 도하다 나게 람유 류 용소 조바 차상 창와 초래와 많이 봐. 내가 냐냐 냠내지 도의값에 셔야 냠내 매제바나 초래와. 도의값은 냠내지 내가 냠내 마제바나 초지마도 지고 말. 제상다 데니기 내 잠니제 janshusим 도의값 셔베기 데니게 삼다 냠낸제 내 데네 왕슈 데네 게림나 조름기 데니게 나게 냠내 제바 있나 다 류 도다 나니게 류 용소 봐 람니 림바 냠는 제에게 차상와지 냠는 지고를 해제래 라바규르스 라바규르에세.
So the Tibetan isn't divided into these outlines. Those are inserted, and the sentences also aren't explicit. So in the same section comes the first half of the next sentence. So the next sentence really is included in the same section. This is how to perfectly train in the complete body of the path that condenses all the key points of the sutras and tantras. As we've heard, one first trains in the sutra parts and the trainings that are shared with practitioners of initial, intermediate, and supreme capacity, in particular when one culminates in successful training or having trained well in bodhicitta and the wisdom realizing emptiness. Thereafter, receiving initiation, one then engages in the trainings, in the generation, and later completion stage. And as the sentence concludes, and this is how one makes meaningful the freedoms and opportunities afforded by your human rebirth. And the text continues, it is by means of this very method that the precious teachings of the Buddha will benefit your own and others' continuum. And the way through training this way that one's own continuum is benefited is clear. Others are benefited through one guiding others, through being a positive influence in the lives of others.
Oh yeah, that de sha shen de dang zu don da ning bo de ding ge kap so dang zu ge do da nga gi nyam len je dang ge cha ba ga yo re se ne dang zu yong su da ba xi yi nam ba de tun bi lam da de na ko ma yue ba dang nga kap so nyam len je yue ba che de kap so yue ba me ba za di cha ba che da nga gi ka me nyam len je la ga ga du lam na dang bo wa nyam len je dang bo wang shu gu re se che yi je de ne sum ba de la nga ga nyam len je da nga de la 다양한 규제 시요레스 규제 시요레스 네 다 규제 오면 나라 숨들라 천재단 체맥이 거냐면지 마도요 말레스 다 규제 고마 레미나 주 레미 규세들라 게림나 조름 있어야 되냐면 제고레스 다데 게림 다 조름들라 냐면 제도 다 류에 아웨 안에 세미 규류 외사스 네 소주옥세 되는 바 주요권에 냐면 제가 두요레스 류에 마웨 세메 귤이 외사 손죽세야지 어디고 느림바 두스는 냐면 제가 요래서 먼저 두스는데 네 하고 와야 되는 셈이냐 어디 다 디링에 나이 걸 개발도 되는지 좀 쉬어야 되래 류에 마웨 세메 귤이 외사 손죽세
So we'll stop there then for tonight. So just to briefly summarize what we looked at this evening was the difference between the Sutra and Tantra paths, and this can be understood through the training in the four purities. On the Sutra path, one does not train in the four purities, but in the Tantric path, one does train in accordance with those. The purity of body, the purity of... I'm trying to remember these. The purity of the body, the purity of retinue, the purity of resources, and the purity of abode. So those are the four that one trains in the tantric vehicle. To enter into the tantric vehicle comes about having trained well in the sutra vehicle. One first has to receive an initiation from an authentic teacher, an authentic Vajra master, and whilst guarding one's vows and pledges well, if one has received an initiation into any of the lower tantras, one then embarks on training in the yoga with signs, thereafter the yoga without signs. Or if one has received initiation into highest yoga tantra, the upper tantra, one will train in first the generation stage and thereafter the completion stage. And then tonight I very, very briefly mentioned the 6 divisions, or the 6 stages of the completion stage, or 6 levels. Namely, physical isolation, verbal isolation, mental isolation, fourthly, the illusory body, 5th, the clear light, and 6th, that of union. So thank you. We'll finish here then for tonight. Thank you.
Question?
Okay.
So, Dorje didn't distinguish between the illusory body attained from the example clear light and the illusory body attained from the meaning clear light. I've heard that the illusory body from the example clear light is the impure illusory body, and from the meaning clear light it's the pure illusory body.
Correct. And so do you want me to ask Anna to say, to check that is correct?
Well,
Just the question.
Can briefly check. The basic question is, what is an illusory body and why is it called illusory?
Okay. So what is the illusory body and why is it called the illusory body? Yeah? Okay.
Gyulu lamna danga zuki bene namgyun bene nga zuki gyuma tungen zuki chike dadang langbo shiru tuyongdo kabla di dadang langbo chi di chike koron namgyun kisu de tunpa jine che kigo marwa gyuma tuen che dachi tunpa ina ngone rang daki tang nashin kigo marwa ho karsane koron ki 파마다 아말마 게데 샤다 루고다 강라딘 유 줍티비 다시레베스 마르와 고미리아 따나 신된 걸 된다라 데니기 줍마디와 제전 규마세로와 규 디나신 아주 류세디 남경아주 미 류세디 파메기 두신진 샤타 뒤지 루고다 샤다 차다 바바 차상게 좀데 류세거로 아주 샤타 뒤지 풍포세거와 다데디 가르스네 동반이 또비 검체 동반이 또비 로 검발에 때네 동반이 당어 예매기 룽디 룽셈 디점을 줍되긴기 수유고디 샤용 거래 수유고 룽셈 점을 줍이기 룽기 년린 제발에 때네 룽기 류를 때네 줍되게 줍되거래 근데 바도 류다 찍바래 바도 류스 찍바셔거라 어디 줍되게 제가 될래야 미 류스 민다바래 류스 내가 저 샤다 차다 바바도 루고기 줍디게 요마래 그 년龄 규디 동반이 셴버교 룽디기 년龄 제발을 텐데 룽기 류로 저 줍디야지래 된자고 규류사
If we think of a horse or an elephant that has been conjured by a magician, it will look just like an actual horse or elephant, but it will not be. Its body will not be comprised of flesh because it was not born from a mare or a female elephant. So it will look and it will appear to consciousness as being a horse or elephant, but it will not be, and one can judge in that it's not comprised of flesh, not having been born from a parent. So similarly, the illusory body, this is unlike our body, which has been born from a parent, from our mother, and therefore is comprised of flesh and so forth. Whereas the illusory body arises from energy or wind and consciousness. So therefore, the illusory body does, like an illusory horse, does not arise from the birth from a mother, and is not, the illusory body, like an illusory horse, is not comprised of flesh and bones and so forth. Rather, the illusory body has arisen from energy and consciousness. And in this way, we can understand it as being similar to the body of an intermediate state being. Okay?
바도와 간저 바도와 세대 간저 시주의 갑라 나중에 셈 참어디기 대당 오지 룽디 류디모 지게 수부 바도 류디 주고 그래 룽디 류디 주고 그래 디고 레기 왕가 주도 마도 공배도게 말해 나가 지게다데 귤리세데 람냠네 동반이 공제 데네 셈 차쇼디기 오셈 룽디 녜len 제발드네 류디 주고 바도 류 나진지 주고 그래 제산 될이야 귤리시 그래 단다라 먼저 바도 류 주비야 되다 다디 귤리 주비야기 녜len 룽 참모디 바 찍바래데 가르쳐 봐 요라세네 바도 류디 주비야기 룽 참모디기 다 냠도 셈 참모죠와 니 셈 규마지 마도 동이 또 받아 로다 가야 말이고 셈 규마는 다가시르스 남준이 셈 나시시레 참모 셈 규마시로와 다른 셈 남준이 셈 참모들마도 거유 동반이 또 받아 그 람공바 가야 말와 바도 류주야 이게 맞아 치셈 참모시로와 치셈 참모디 셈디기 전부기 룽디 데데 바도 주고래 룽류리 바도 류리 이제 셈 그런 셈 참모들마도 동이 또 별로 다 지내 가야 말해 그 류기 오면 주고 다른 안서 동반이 또 별로 검제 외세요 검제 지도 디셈 참모디 동반이 또 별로 롱었음도 동이 또 별로래 디 델라 때네 디 셴버기 룽디 류시 주고래 바도 류주다 찍바래 이내다 가르쳐 봐선 디 동반이 또 별로 검로래 검배 또 주고래 제산 델 귤리레스 그래.
So actually, the illusory body is, you can maybe say it's just like the body of an intermediate state being or a Abode being, in that it's not composed of flesh, but where there is the difference in how it is attained. The Abode body is, the body of a being in the Abode is attained through karma, whereas the illusory body is attained through meditation. So there is a clear difference. But where there is the similarity is that neither body is comprised of flesh and bone and so forth, but rather it arises from consciousness and energy. But the consciousness, and a second difference between the Abode body and the illusory body is the consciousness. Whilst both are a subtle consciousness, not a coarse everyday consciousness that we utilize, but a subtle consciousness, the consciousness that gives rise to the illusory body is a consciousness of clear light. In other words, a wisdom realizing emptiness, and not a coarse wisdom realizing emptiness such as attained on the Sutra path, but this is a very subtle consciousness that is realizing emptiness that is cultivated only through the Tantric path. So therefore, the consciousness that arises as the illusory body, unlike the consciousness of a Abode being, the consciousness of the illusory body that has led to the illusory body is a wisdom that's realizing emptiness. So this is another key difference. And thank you.